welcome to Unit 8. We are more than halfway done with our curriculum for this year, so I'm pretty excited about that. I'm telling you that this is a very quick unit. It's only about 4 videos, and then we're going to be done. Then it's test day. So let's jump right on into the Industrial Revolution. This is probably one of my favorite units. It's very short, but it's one of my favorites because we have so much cool stuff that happens during this time period. Okay, so first things first, I want you to take a minute and look at the picture on the screen. Really take a minute, click pause, examine it. What do you see? Look at the fine details. Take just a minute and do that. Okay, so now I want you to just use your imagination for a minute. You don't need to write anything down, just listen, use your imagination. You are a 15-year-old living in England where the Industrial Revolution has spurred the growth of thousands of factories. Cheap labor is in great demand. Like millions of other teenagers, you do not go to school. Instead, you work in the factory 6 days a week, 14 hours a day. The small pay that you receive is needed to help support your family. You trudge to work before dawn every day and work until after sundown. Inside the workplace, the air is hot and foul, and after sunset it is so dark it's hard to see. Minding the machines is exhausting, dirty, and dangerous. Now, while there is sun shining through the window when these boys started their workday, it certainly was a long time. It'd been gone for quite a while by the time they were going home for the night. These machines are super dangerous. Children work these machines for many reasons, but one of them being that they were smaller and could fit in small spaces when the machines needed to be repaired. It also was very hot and extremely dusty from the thousands of bobbins running through the machine. So the bobbins are the things that are right here in front of the kids. These are bobbins. They're holding the thread that's going through the machine. So it would get extremely hot because of all the machinery as well. So keeping all of that in mind, I want you to answer the 2 questions in the questions column of your notes. Would you attempt to change your working conditions, and would you join a union, go to school, or run away? So click pause, take just a minute and do that. Okay, so what is the Industrial Revolution exactly? It's a time period between 1750 and 1850 when the world of industry was completely changed. From the spinning jenny to locomotive trains, there were new inventions and innovations all the time, and these improvements are what led to the Industrial Revolution. Now, in Latin America, France, and the United States, there were new governments in place after the political revolutions, and this leads to new changes in industry. The Industrial Revolution will change how people will work. It will also greatly increase the amount of goods and products that were machine-made. Major impacts on people's lives are going to be made during the Industrial Revolution. But before there is an Industrial Revolution, there is an agricultural revolution. Okay? By the 1770s, or in the 1700s, in the 1700s, England was covered with small farms. The landowners who were wealthy started buying up the land of the village farmers. And oftentimes, the farmer would get to stay in his house and continue to farm, but he would be a tenant farmer, meaning that he would do all the work, but the wealthy landowner would get all the profit. Not the greatest situation. But if farming is all you know, then that's what you do. Because they had the means to do so, the wealthy farm owners were able to use improved farming techniques, which led to the Industrial Revolution, or the Agricultural Revolution. These improved farming techniques began with the enclosure movement. After the wealthy landowners brought up the small village farms, or bought them up, a few things happened. First, the landowners began to enclose their farmlands using either fences or hedges like you see in the photo here. The second thing they did was experiment with more productive seeding techniques and harvesting methods, which resulted in larger and better crops. We'll talk in more detail about that in a couple minutes. But 2 important results. 1, these landowners are trying new methods. And 2, as these landowners bought up the smaller farms, they forced the smaller farmers to become either tenant farmers or to give up farming altogether and move into the cities. Now, The upside to the agricultural revolution was that as a whole, the business of farming became more focused on making a profit, being market-oriented as well as becoming more efficient. The downside, it hurt poor farmers. Now, we've already talked about a couple ways this hurt poor farmers, but one more way is that when the enclosure movement occurred, it eliminated common ground where livestock could openly graze. And this was great for poorer farmers because they didn't have to worry about feeding the livestock when they grazed on common ground, meaning that everyone's livestock could graze in that area. Okay, so let's look at some of the changes that occurred in farming. We have Jethro Tull to thank for this fabulous invention. It is a seed drill. Tull realized that the way that farmers were seeding was incredibly wasteful and ineffective. You can see here the guy on the horse would drag a rough version of a plow behind, and then a person would walk behind and scatter the seeds. Hopefully some seeds would actually make it into the ground, but it wouldn't always happen that way. And so many seeds were wasted. So what the seed drill actually does is it allows farmers to sow seeds in well-spaced rows at specific depths. So you can see here, these were the plans for the seed drill. You can see that this is the drill disc, so it digs the hole. Then you have your fertilizer that goes down first, okay? Then over here is the seed tube, and the seeds would drop out, and the packer wheel would pack down the soil on top of it. So it would come back behind and put the soil down so that it could actually grow. So that's the diagram of how it works. And guess what? It is still used today. Doesn't look the same, but it is still used to this day. Okay, let's talk about crop rotation. I know it sounds kind of lame, but really it's pretty cool. So farmers began using the 4-field system during the agricultural revolution. Now, up until now, a 3-field system had been used. The farmers would have 3 fields for crops. There would always be 2 fields planted and always 1 field empty for a year so that the soil would have time to regain the nutrients that had been stripped the last 2 years. So there would always be 1 empty field. With the 4-field system, crops were always planted. So if you look at the diagram, you can see that during year 1, wheat is planted in field 1, barley in field 2, turnips are in field 3, and clover is in field 4. When you look at year 2, though, clover is planted in field 1, wheat is planted in field 2, barley in 3, and turnips in field 4, and so on. So over the period of the 4 years, the soil is being replenished with the various nutrients that previous plant had stripped it of. The crops complement one another and replenish the soil. 2 benefits to this system are more plants. More plants equals more profit. Also, the soil ends up not being completely stripped of all the good nutrients needed to have healthy and hardy crops. Okay, so why England? Well, there are a number of reasons. Let's start with population. Here's a chart of England's population change over 2,000 years. So over here we have the Iron Age, then we go through Pax Romana, the Dark Ages, Middle Ages, and all that stuff you learned about in World History 1. There's your timeline for it. Okay, so here is the Black Death. Okay, where is it? Here's the Black Death right here. Okay, so look at how drastically it increased after the Black Death. So we have our Black Death, we have our people dying, but then we have a drastic increase here. Okay, look at how much change there is. So remember when we talked about the enclosure movement and how it forced folks to move to the cities? Well, check it out. This is how much cities were impacted. So look at Manchester. Over a period of just 40 years, the population increased over 300,000. That's insane, absolutely insane. But population isn't the only reason why the Industrial Revolution began in England. They also had extensive natural resources there. They had water, power, and coal to fuel the new machines that were being used in factories. England had iron ore, which was used to construct stronger machines and tools and buildings. Rivers, like the one in the picture, were important because merchant ships were able to sail and transport goods. So what about the economy of England at this point? How does it support industrialization? Well, investing is one way. Wealthy folks have some money to spare, so we see that they begin to invest in all of these awesome new inventions that are being invented. Other ways include growing overseas trade. As a result, they are experiencing prosperity. So this climate of progress led to a demand for goods. So basically, they had the land, the labor, and the money to be able to do it. Okay, let's talk inventions now. All of these innovative ways of doing things end up having a major impact on industry because they completely revolutionize industry. The first industry to be vastly impacted by the Industrial Revolution was the textile industry. It was the first industry to be completely transformed by invention. So merchants were able to speed up the process by using spinners and weavers, which increased profits. With all of the new machines and methods, it just didn't take as long to make cloth, which in turn meant it didn't take as long to make clothing. The entire world wore British wool, linen, and cotton. So let's look at some of these major inventions that revolutionized the textile industry. In 1773, John Kay invented the flying shuttle. The flying shuttle quickly carried threads of yarn back and forth through a loom when the weaver pulled a lever. This greatly increased productivity because before the flying shuttle, the weaving could not be done by just one person. Plus, the weaving was also done by hand. The other super invention came around in 1764, before the flying shuttle, but it was the spinning jenny. Now, I'm not going to tell you all about that one because we're going to do something in class, and I don't want to ruin it for you. So, spinning jenny came around first, and then the flying shuttle. So, large factories were able to set up machines. These machines needed water to run. So the factories were typically built along the rivers. Again, it was easy for merchants to get finished products and trade. As more and more of these factories are built, though, we begin to see less and less of the cottage system. Now, the cottage system was where goods and products were made in homes or cottages instead of large industrial factories. Okay, so that really covers what we're going to talk about today. Like I said, next video, in next class, we're going to be talking about the technological advances that occurred during the Industrial Revolution. Some pretty cool stuff is coming up. I'll see you then.